Hey, this is Melina Kusera, your indie fantasy author. It's been a while since we chatted, so can we talk? I think the last time I actually sat down and talked to the camera was February or January, and a lot of things have changed. So if you get the newsletter, then you know what's changed. If you don't, then this may be all new for you. So let me rewind back to the previous update. So my father passed away in September, and I stopped doing interviews at that time on this channel because I needed to grieve, to help my mom with, just all the things. It was very unexpected, his passing. So I've been helping her with a lot of things. So that happened. And then in December, my company was bought out. So that happened. Everything seemed to be okay on that front, but then things are not okay. More negative life changes coming, mostly due to that I have an official end date for when I will no longer be with the company. And that's taking some time to process. I will have worked there for 16 years at the anticipated date of separation. So that's a bit heavy and a lot to process. And that forced me to change my whole publishing schedule and what I had planned to write. So and that change came out, I found out in late April. So right before the Kickstarter for the books behind me launched, I had found out about this. And so the books in that Kickstarter, which launched in May, was the illustrated versions of the His Angelic Keeper series, which is all about Saren's sister Soven and her journey from being a ghost who does not want to be a ghost, wants to get back to the real world to help out her family, to an angel, and then finally to the Angel of Death. And so the sequel series, which I had started writing late last year, which is called Riders of the Apocalypse, picks up with right after that point where the all the Riders of the Apocalypse have been released, and now she needs to track them down, and she doesn't want to. She doesn't feel like this should be her responsibility. Yes, she didn't get there in time to stop it, but at the same time, she didn't know that this was happening, or that her ex-guardian angel, Malachiah, who was the villain in her series, was even doing this. So a lot of things, because she was helping Saren, her brother, with the whole adversary thing and the Egeldar and the whole madness of that started and at the end in Chrisbreaker Fastfooted, which was book number 3, and went through Chrisbreaker Hidden, which is book number 6. There was a lot going on, and she was helping him out with that. So it's not that she was doing nothing, but she was very busy with that and not aware of what her ex-guardian angel was up to. So in the first book of the Riders of the Apocalypse series, which came out as part of that Kickstarter, that book is called Chaos Rises. She needed to track down Death, the fourth Rider of the Apocalypse, because Death had a serious axe to grind. Death, the Rider of the Apocalypse, used to be Death, the Angel of Death, but she gave that up to become the Rider of the Apocalypse, thinking that would give her more power, more agency, all the things that everyone wants. And it didn't quite work out that way as she'd hoped. So she's pissed, and she wants to destroy Soven, because now Soven has all that power that came with being the angel of death, because that is, she accidentally took on that role to, well, I don't want to go into details. That's all covered in His Angelic Keeper Tempted, which is the 4th book in His Angelic Keeper series, how she became that, why she became that. It wasn't her choice. She was tricked into it. But everybody's everybody's happy that she's the Angel of Death because she's nice and reasonable. So there's a lot of people who are not unhappy with this decision and are quite happy that someone tricked her into it. And they hope she never gives it up. Well, I don't know if she will. We'll have to find out. I don't know what my characters are going to do until they do it. They don't tell me. So that's that. And I had intended to spend the rest of the year writing the other 3 books in that series, which were going to be 2 more books where she is the main character, big protagonist, and obviously where who is right here, I don't know if right here, is helping her out with this, as Warrior Angels do. And then the fourth book in that series was going to be Cursebreaker Jousts, where Sarn takes center stage and they have to deal with War, the second rider of the Apocalypse, who has taken over Queen Shiari. And that takeover happened in his series. So that's why he laid claim to that book. And I said, okay, you want to be in a book? Okay. You want to be the main character? Sure. No pushback here. But after finding out about the job situation and the changes with that, I couldn't write about fighting the apocalypse. I just felt like my whole world was crumbling down and I needed something lighter. And so the characters always have a suggestion. And Rand suggested, why don't you finish the early stories from the newsletter that I write? So the newsletter that I write started in 2017. And I didn't know what to put in it. And I didn't know any indie authors. So I just wrote short stories about what the characters were doing in between books, usually about them bugging me to give them more page time and coming to my apartment to do that bugging. And that evolved over time into monsters and things coming to my apartment and them having to save me from them. And it just went from there, and it just became its own thing, its own separate storylines. And then people started asking, could I put them into books? So they didn't have to go to my website and click through all the newsletters to follow the story. So they are all there if you have the patience to click through the blog. So back in around the pandemic, I started doing that. And I took the first story, which was the most complete, that had beginning, middle, and end, and actual story arc, because the earlier ones were just vignettes, because I wasn't setting out to write novels in my newsletter, although that's what ended up happening later, but I didn't set out that way. So the later adventures were much easier to pull together into books because they were written as a book with the 3-act structure. I mean, it needed some fixing because there were plot holes and things that I didn't realize when I was just writing a chunk every week in the newsletter. But when you go back and reread it, you're like, well, we have some plot holes we need to fill. So I did that in the book, obviously. So the first one that came out was Dragon Spells, which was the first book of the Cursebreaker Companion series. And that came out in 2020 or 2021, one of those. And then I did the sequel, which was Rogue Spells, pretty close after that. And that continued with the newsletter adventures that followed the Dragon Spells storyline that was in the newsletter. And then I came to a problem because it introduced a villain that had been kind of in the background manipulating things, but never really showed up in the newsletter adventures, because the newsletter adventures were all from Rand's point of view. So there was nobody. Occasionally we get Sarn's point of view or Myron's, but nobody else, or the dragon. We did have the dragon a few times, but nobody else. So I didn't really know who she was or what she wanted or why she was out to get me specifically. So I couldn't write the third book in the Cursebreaker's Companion series until I figured that out. So Rand suggested I go back and write the earlier adventures and figure out, where did Dysteria come from? Where did the portals come from? Where did the newsletter dragon come from? Why do I have a newsletter dragon? How did the characters from a fictional world end up running my newsletter and my life? So, because none of that had been answered in the earlier newsletter adventures. I'm sorry to say that. All of those vignettes in the early newsletters just started from the premise that this was all just happening, but it never explained the origins of anything. So around the time that my father passed away, I had started working on that, trying to take the earliest vignettes and try and put them into a cohesive story about, like, well, where did the portal even come from? Why is there a portal that goes from their world to my apartment specifically? Like, where did it come from? Why is it there? And also Dysteria. Why is she after me? What did I do? So I started working on that. I finished that earlier this year, around a little bit after I finished Chaos Rises. I was kind of, at one point I was writing them both at the same time. And then the characters in Chaos Rises made it very clear that they were not happy with me doing that. So I had to finish Chaos Rises and then finish Catch the Scribe, and where they basically they catch their scribe and make her theirs. Obviously, me, I write their books, and it's completely ridiculous. It's a little bit heavy because it does start after my sister passed away and I was kind of in a dark place, but then it is lighter. All the stuff with the characters is lighter. There is a little bit of heaviness with that, because that is the reason I started publishing, and I didn't want to cut that out, even though it made the original book a little bit heavier than I had intended to. But I felt that was necessary context because that is so much a part of my author journey. Yeah, but the second book, which I finished a couple days ago or last week, I'm not sure, the days blur, is Book Battles. And that book is just pure. It is exactly what you would expect from a book based on my newsletter adventures. Rand is scheming at the very beginning. He is scheming at the very end. And there is just mayhem in the middle. Lots of magical mayhem. Sarn is completely reluctant about all of it, as is his role. He is reluctant in the Chris Baker books up until the end of Chris Baker Hidden. So the stories after 2021, which is when Chris Baker Hidden was published, he can be less reluctant. But up until that, he gets to stay reluctant, and Ren gets to stay gung ho, and they are a nice foil for each other. Yeah. So I just started writing Rogue Characters, which is going to be the third book in this trilogy. I had thought originally to put these 3 early newsletter adventures into the Chris Baker Companion series and just renumber things, and I thought that would be really confusing. So Rand suggested that instead, let's take those 3 books that now tell the origin of the portal, the newsletter dragon, Dysteria, why all these people come to my apartment, and why am I constantly in peril, and put them in their own trilogy. And so I'm going to do that, and that new trilogy will be called Tales of a Cursebreaker in New York, because I live in New York. I don't live in New York City, but I do live in New York. So that's the plan. And I've written a few chapters so far for Rogue Characters. It's a little bit tough pulling that one together because we need to jump ahead a little bit to keep the story in sync with the publication timeline of when things actually published. Thankfully for the characters, unless I'm writing their story, their timeline doesn't advance. So for them, it's the next day from when the previous book ended. But for me, months have passed because I have things going on. So I'm trying to make that book just as fun as Book Battles, and also answer the question of how did they end up running the newsletter? Because that's the question we haven't answered yet. We got the origin of the newsletter in the second book, Book Battles. Of the newsletter dragon. She's definitely in there, and she's a lot of fun. And obviously Dysteria, we introduced her in the first book, and we've been progressing her craziness. So yeah, so that's what I'm doing. And my goal is to finish Rogue Characters by the end of August, and then to release all 3 books in the Tales of a Cursebreaker in New York in September. So something to look forward to. I know there's been a lot going on, so I hope that having these fun books to look forward to there that will give you a bright spot, over the summer. And when you read them, they're fun. So they're wacky, they are fun. They're not exactly like anything else you may have read, and I'm sorry about that. If you've read my newsletter adventures, then you know exactly what you're getting into, except these will connect. They won't be random vignettes. They will connect. There's a whole cohesive storyline throughout all 3 books. So that's coming, and that's exciting, and that's been really helpful with everything going on in my life and in the world. So what is coming after the Tales in the Cursebreaker of a Cursebreaker in New York series is I'm going to write the 3rd book in the Cursebreaker Companion series, and that book is called Storm Spells, because now I will know exactly how to approach that book, because the problem with that book was at the end of Rogue Spells, they went back in time to 2018. To when I actually did the Storm Spells story, when that actually happened. It was a real event. This was real. Some of the things in our newsletter are actually real things that happened in New York. Maybe there wasn't as much magic involved in the real event, but who knows? So is to do that and to get that out sometime in the fall, I hope. All depends on how that book goes and how crazy the characters get, because they've been behaving really well, because I've been holding 2 books hostage. I've been holding Catch the Scribe and now Book Battles hostage. I won't release them until we've gotten rogue characters completed. I don't have that leverage with storm spells because the previous 2 books in that series are already published. So I'm going to hope that they behave, and then I can get it out in the time frame that I'm hoping for. But we'll see. I'm not sure what's after that. There is the characters would like me to try writing a litRPG story in where there is like a game overlay on their world, but their world is still real as it is in the newsletter story world. But the people who are interacting with them think they're playing a game. So I'm still looking into it. I haven't said yes. I haven't said no. They're already planning their cameo, so I'm probably going to end up writing this at some point because they're going to keep bugging me about it. But I'm not confirming that is going to be the next thing after Storm Spells. I had intended to write the sequels to Relic Hunter. That would be Mage Hunter and Demon Hunter, and close that out and get that off my to-write list. But we'll see if the characters let me do that. So more on that soon. We'll have another chat in a few months, and I'll tell you where I'm at in all these things. So that's it. Just wanted to pop on here and let you know what's going on, what you can look forward to, and I hope you enjoyed Rogue Gods. It was something I really wanted that as a full cast audiobook. I wasn't able to do it with humans, so I decided to try it with the digital voices, see what happens. So yeah, there's going to be, there's compilations with all the episodes together. So you don't have to, you can listen to them all at once instead of episode by episode. That's coming starting next week. So yeah, that's where we are. So thank you for being here. Like, subscribe, follow, do all the things. And again, I'm Melinda Crusair. I've been your indie fantasy author, and I hope that you're as excited about the books to come as I am. Have a great day, and we'll speak soon. Okay, bye.